Why do women chase men who cannot see them, while ignoring the voice inside that pleads to be chosen first? Why does rejection sting so deeply, yet secretly mirror the shadow we have abandoned within ourselves? Most women spend years thinking love is found in another's gaze, but Jung warned us, we only attract what we unconsciously are. Imagine realizing that when you love yourself fully, the right man cannot ignore you, because his soul will recognize yours. Let's uncover why. 1. The mirror of unworthiness. Why desire turns to desperation. Why do so many women find themselves pulled to men who withhold, dismiss, or disregard them? Why does the heart race faster when his attention is scarce, not abundant? Here lies a paradox of attraction most never see. Love becomes magnetic, not through wholeness, but through wounds seeking reflection. A woman attached to her unworthiness unconsciously mistakes rejection for proof of her deepest belief that she is not enough. This is the old invisible game, the shadow of worthlessness disguised as passion. A woman conditioned to people-please, to suppress her own needs, will endure neglect so long as she feels the faint promise of being chosen. The validation she chases is not truly his. It is the missing father's approval, the absent lover's gaze, the withheld love of childhood echoing still. She confuses scarcity with value, hunger with passion, and so she becomes addicted not to love, but to the pain of almost love. The consequences are brutal. She becomes the pursuer of breadcrumbs, shrinking herself to fit into spaces too small for her spirit. She finds her emotional energy drained, pulled into relationships where her worth is debated rather than celebrated. She looks into mirrors each night asking, "Why am I not enough?" But the truth is not that she isn't enough. It is that she doesn't yet know she is already whole. Jung's wisdom reveals the truth. We do not attract what we deserve, but what we unconsciously believe about ourselves. Until a woman confronts the shadow of her unworthiness, every admirer, every lover, is but a stage where her unresolved wounds play out again and again. Self-betrayal becomes the silent scriptwriter of her romantic life. The path to transformation is radical self-recognition. When a woman dares to stand before her wounds and say, "I see you and I choose differently," she begins individuation, that sacred becoming where the fragmented psyche assembles into wholeness. From this place, desire no longer masquerades as desperation. A man's rejection no longer equals her erasure. Instead, she becomes the chooser, the one who decides, who is worthy of my presence? Imagine a lioness, regal and fierce, watching prey cross her path. She does not chase every shadow in the tall grass. She waits, sovereign, until the one worthy of her pursuit steps into her field. That is how a woman transformed by self-worth stands in life and love. Close your eyes and picture standing in front of a mirror. Instead of asking, "Am I enough for him?" you whisper, "Is he enough for me?" Power begins the moment you stop begging for recognition and start embodying it. But rejecting unworthiness opens the door to the next, even more dangerous trap, the betrayal of yourself when you mistake attachment for love. That is where we go next. 2. The silent self-betrayal, when love becomes a cage. Why do women fear being alone, yet stay chained to men who make them feel invisible? Why does loneliness in solitude feel more unbearable than loneliness in companionship? Underneath this paradox lies the shadow of abandonment, the deepest terror of being left unheld, unworthy, unseen. And out of that fear, many women betray themselves every day. This betrayal is not loud. It doesn't happen in arguments or explosions of pain. It happens silently, in compromises too subtle to name. It begins the moment she swallows her truth instead of speaking it, the moment she accepts being half-loved instead of fully adored, the moment she says yes when her body screamed no. Slowly, love becomes less about connection and more about survival. The woman becomes her own captor. She clings to relationships not because they nourish, but because they promise escape from emptiness. Yet Jung reminds us, what we resist will eventually master us. The very emptiness she fears will seep into the relationship she protects. She will find herself lonelier in company than she ever was in solitude. The suffering deepens. She silences her dreams, so he stays. She molds her spirit until it no longer fits her bone. And one morning, she looks in the mirror and no longer recognizes who is staring back. This is the shadow's most merciless theft, the erasure of self in pursuit of conditional affection. But when consciousness breaks through, everything shifts. To end self-betrayal, a woman must confront her hunger for attachment and ask, is this need keeping me alive, or is it keeping me small? True empowerment is born in the crucible of chosen solitude. When she embraces her aloneness, not as punishment, but as power, she transforms loneliness into sanctuary. In mythology, Persephone returned from the underworld not broken, but reborn as queen. So too must a woman return from the underworld of self-betrayal, no longer fearing abandonment because she has reclaimed herself as her own constant companion. Picture yourself standing in an empty room, hearing only your heartbeat. Instead of despair, feel the sacred truth. You are not abandoned. You are whole, even in silence. Freedom begins the day you stop staying where your soul withers. And once betrayal of self is dissolved, something even greater awakens. The power to choose men not from deficiency, but from depth. That leads us into the next hidden truth of attraction. 3. The projection trap. When you love a man who exists only in your mind. Why do women often fall in love with men who cannot love them back, yet cling to hope as though it is proof? Why do they ignore reality but exalt fantasy? Because the unconscious does not fall in love with the man who stands before her. It falls in love with the projection, the reflection of her own hidden desires splashed across his image. Carl Jung revealed this as the anima and animus dance. A woman casts her unclaimed inner masculine, strength, assertiveness, protector energy, onto men. She falls for him not because of who he is, but because he carries the weight of qualities she has yet to awaken within herself. That is why she sees potential where none exists, why she forgives red flags as misunderstandings, and why she holds on to a version of him that lives nowhere except in her psyche. The conflict is devastating. She yearns for a man who exists only in fragments, a fantasy stitched from hope, fear, and unmet longings. The real man may be inconsistent, inattentive, emotionally closed, but her projection blinds her, binding her to a mirage while her spirit grows thirsty. She is trapped not by him, but by her own imagination. The consequences of this blindness are brutal. Years wasted on almost relationships, craving a future promised but never delivered. Nights spent rationalizing words that do not align with actions. Despair when the real man repeatedly shatters the myth she wove around him. And worse, the erosion of trust in her own intuition because she mistakes illusion for truth. But awakening begins here, when a woman dares to withdraw her power from the projection. Because every quality she worships in him, confidence, passion, determination, is a quality dormant within her. Jung calls this individuation, integrating the masculine within, so she no longer needs to search for it outside. When she embodies her own strength, she no longer kneels before the shadow of another man's potential. Imagine a stained glass window. The sunlight shining through it is not the glass's creation. It is the radiance behind it. So too, it is with projection. The brilliance she attributed to him was always her own light refracted back. When she claims it, she breaks the spell. Close your eyes and imagine pulling back a veil from a man's face and standing before your own reflection. Would you chase him still, or would you finally turn inward and embrace the one who never leaves? You stop being deceived the moment you realize the love you admired was your own power in disguise. But leaving projection is not enough, because once the illusion is removed, a woman faces her greatest crossroads: to continue abandoning herself for love, or to raise her boundaries so high they become a throne. That leads us into the next revelation. 4. The throne of boundaries, power that commands respect. Why does the heart whisper, "Be patient with him," when his actions scream indifference? Why do so many women excuse neglect, waiting for love to transform cruelty into kindness? The answer is simple, yet terrifying. Without boundaries, love becomes self-sacrifice. And when sacrifice replaces dignity, attraction turns into enslavement. A woman without boundaries is a kingdom without walls. Anyone may enter, ravage, and leave at will. She will find herself begging for respect she never demanded, pleading for time she never valued, and rationalizing behavior she never deserved. Deep beneath this comes from the shadow of fear. If I say no, I may lose him. If I speak truth, I may end up abandoned. So she swallows every protest, silences every instinct, until her heart becomes a graveyard of unsaid words. But in the silence, something darker grows. Men do not ignore women because they are unworthy. They ignore women who signal through absence of boundaries that they can be ignored without consequence. Attraction without respect is nothing but temporary obsession. Respect is what roots desire into permanence. And no man can respect a woman who will not first protect herself. The consequences are costly. Repeated cycles of being undervalued, emotional exhaustion from endless compromise, a gnawing bitterness toward love itself, because she wonders, am I asking for too much? Never realizing that the absence of boundaries was the betrayal that allowed mistreatment to flourish. But a throne is built not by denial of love, but by dignified gateways that declare, only those who recognize my value may enter. When a woman forges her boundaries, she ceases to chase potential men and allows herself to be chosen by powerful love. Her silence transforms from suppression into sovereignty. Not silence because she fears speaking, but silence because she no longer entertains what insults her soul. Imagine a queen seated upon her throne. Around her stand soldiers, not men, but her own boundaries. Each one whispers, "No further," to those who come with deceit, disrespect, or dishonor. Only the worthy pass through the gates. This is how boundaries birth attraction that never decays, by converting her into a standard no man dares take lightly. Picture yourself standing before a massive iron gate. Behind it lies your heart. Ask, who do you allow to enter, and who must remain outside? Respect is never given to the one who begs for it. It is carved in stone by the one who demands it. And once boundaries are reclaimed, the dynamic of love shifts permanently. But this is not the end, for the greatest transformation appears when attraction evolves from scarcity into abundance, and that journey begins next. 5. Scarcity's illusion. Why chasing love weakens desire? Why does it seem that when you chase love, it runs away, but when you retreat, it hunts you? Why do women often give more, only to feel less valued? The hidden answer lies in scarcity, the unconscious belief that love is limited. When a woman internalizes scarcity, she behaves as though love is a prize outside herself, a resource she must compete for. And in doing so, she unconsciously diminishes her own allure. Love cannot survive under the laws of hunger, for hunger breeds fear, and fear contorts attraction into anxiety. The more she clings, the more she signals that her worth is dependent on another. The paradox is brutal. In the attempt to secure him, she teaches him she has no choice but him. And what is freely claimed is rarely treasured deeply. The tragedy of scarcity is that it blinds a woman to her inherent abundance. She forgets that she is not chasing love. She is love. When she views the world through lack, rejection feels fatal. Every unanswered text becomes evidence of her inadequacy, every silence proof that she is replaceable. And so she spirals deeper into self-erasure, bargaining with herself and lowering her standards just to avoid being discarded. But Jung teaches that projection of scarcity is nothing but the shadow of neglect turned outward. The woman who once received crumbs in childhood becomes the woman who accepts crumbs in adulthood, believing it is the best she can earn. Until she stops confusing attention with affection and scarcity with value, she will remain in endless pursuit of love she cannot hold. The path forward requires a radical inversion, embodying abundance. True allure is born when a woman operates not from fear of loss, but from fullness. She no longer grasps at every opportunity for love. She selects based on resonance. Men sense this shift instinctively. A woman anchored in her abundance does not cling or chase. She mirrors the sunlight itself, warm, consistent, radiant, yet untouchable by desperation. Consider the ocean. It does not beg rivers to flow into it. It simply is. Vast, infinite, magnetic. Rivers cannot resist finding their way to it. So too is the magnetic force of an abundant woman. She does not plead, "Choose me." She walks as though she is already chosen by life itself. Close your eyes and picture yourself sitting in a garden of overflowing blooms. Which man would enter? The one who takes petals carelessly, or the one who bows, stunned by your radiance? The answer reveals itself. You do not chase love when you are love itself. And when abundance replaces scarcity, attraction transforms. Yet what solidifies this transformation is a second truth: the power of withdrawal, not from fear, but from sovereignty. That is where the next revelation begins. 6. The magnetic withdrawal. Power in the absence. Why do some women become unforgettable after they walk away? Why does a man suddenly awaken to her value only when her presence disappears? This paradox reveals one of the fiercest dynamics of attraction. Absence often ignites respect where presence was taken for granted. The shadow of neediness collapses when a woman learns the art of dignified withdrawal. In the unconscious realm, distance signifies value. That which is scarce feels precious. That which is always available feels expendable. A woman who refuses to overstay where she is not honored teaches a man, without a word, what treatment is acceptable. Her leaving becomes more powerful than her pleading ever was. He realizes what he cannot replace, not because she punished him, but because she no longer offers her radiance to the undeserving. Yet many women resist this act of sovereignty. Fear whispers, "If you walk away, you will end up alone." But the opposite is true. When she remains where love is absent, she confirms to herself and to him that she is willing to be overlooked. Self-abandonment becomes the cost of staying. Withdrawal, on the other hand, is not rejection of men. It is revelation of standards, and standards are magnetic. The consequences of resisting this power are dire. exhaustion from proving her worth, heartache from staying too long in hope of change, bitterness toward men, toward relationships, toward herself. She becomes ghost-like in her own story, existing in the background of another man's half-commitment. Her silence is no longer sovereign, it is suffocation. But the moment she withdraws in dignity, the air changes. Men who once ignored her now sense a shift. For true absence speaks louder than endless words. It is not manipulation, it is truth carved into space. I will not remain where my presence is undervalued. In that withdrawal, her radiance multiplies because she has honored herself above all. In mythology, even goddesses disappeared into retreat. Artemis withdrew into her sacred forests, demanding respect through her distance. Men who followed without reverence never returned whole. Withdrawal has always been the weapon of the sacred feminine, not to punish, but to protect. Visualize yourself walking out of a crowded room, head held high, leaving behind the man who once doubted your worth. Feel the silence you carry with you. That silence is your crown. You are remembered most fiercely in the spaces you refuse to remain unseen. And once the art of withdrawal is embraced, a woman no longer fears solitude. She knows that her absence commands more weight than false togetherness. Yet this power unlocks something even greater, the evolution of her archetype, from seeker of love to embodiment of love. That is where we now go next. 7. Embodiment of the inner beloved, becoming the love you seek. Why do women wait for the man who will complete them when the truth is that no man can? Why do they postpone wholeness, hoping a relationship will finally heal the fracture inside? This is one of Jung's most piercing insights. Until you fall in love with your own soul, you will forever seek fragments of yourself in another. A woman who has not embraced her inner beloved, her own union of anima and animus, her feminine and masculine energies, will endlessly pursue men as saviors. She wants him to provide the safety she denies herself, the direction she has not yet claimed, the passion she suppresses. And like a thirsty wanderer in a desert, she will chase mirages, confusing external men for the oasis that already exists within. The conflict is unrelenting. If he stays, she feels secure, but the security never lasts. If he withdraws, she collapses into despair. The cycle feeds itself endlessly, because without recognition of her inner beloved, every relationship becomes dependency, masquerading as devotion. She doesn't truly love him. She loves what he symbolizes, access to the pieces of herself she has disowned. The suffering is predictable. Her mood rises and falls with his approval. She fears his loss more than she values her truth, and she forgets that love is not built upon worship of another, but upon wholeness of self. In truth, she uses the relationship to avoid confronting the emptiness that only she can fill. The breakthrough is radical self-marriage, what Jung would call individuation, the union of opposites within. When she embraces the disciplined strength of the inner masculine and the flowing receptivity of the inner feminine, she evolves. She no longer projects the missing parts onto others. She becomes queen and protector, muse and warrior, lover and beloved all at once. From this embodiment, her presence radiates completeness. No man can complete her because nothing is lacking. Thus, when love enters, it does not bind, it enhances. Think of a flame within a glass lantern. Without the container, the flame flickers wildly, easily extinguished. Without the flame, the glass is empty. Together, they create enduring light. So too within the woman. When feminine and masculine unite, her inner lantern shines imperishable. Close your eyes and imagine placing a golden ring on your own finger, not as possession, but as promise. The vow, is not I await someone to save me. The vow is I belong to me first. Love becomes irresistible when you no longer ask another to complete what was never broken. But this realization is not the final note. For once a woman embodies her inner beloved, she ignites the greatest gravitational force of all, the inevitability of being seen by the man who cannot ignore her. That leads us to the ultimate revelation. 8. The irresistible signal, when self-love becomes unignorable. Why is it that some women enter a room without saying a word, yet command every gaze? Why does authenticity draw men more fiercely than beauty sculpted to perfection? The answer lies in the deepest law of attraction. When a woman fully loves herself, she emits a signal no man of depth can ignore. Self-love is not bubble baths, affirmations, or fleeting rituals. It is warfare against lifelong self-betrayal. It is the courage to reject half-love. It is the fire that burns false identities, the silence that refuses disrespect, the discipline that preserves boundaries. It is the rarest power because it cannot be faked. When real, it is unshakable. A woman rooted in self-love does not beg to be chosen. She chooses. And in that choosing, she becomes magnetic beyond reason. The conflict many women face is their fear of this kind of love, because true self-love costs them the safety of mediocrity. It requires walking away from shallow desire, enduring solitude, burying illusions. It demands that she stop blaming men and finally confront herself. Most avoid this path, preferring comfort in familiar pain rather than the emancipation of radical self-valuing. But the consequences of resisting are devastating. Her relationships remain transactional, her attraction patterns cyclical, her heart forever restless. No matter how beautiful, kind, or loyal she becomes, she wonders why men do not rise to meet her. The answer is brutal. They cannot rise when she has not risen within herself. She attracts not based on intention, but on being. The solution is not to demand attention, but to embody it. Jung taught that individuation is not theory, but transformation, a breaking and remaking of self until the shadow is integrated. The feminine is honored, and the masculine within her is awakened. This is the inner alchemy. Once achieved, the external cannot resist reflecting it. The right man feels it like gravity, a pull that is undeniable because he recognizes sovereignty before him. Picture a lighthouse on a cliff. It does not chase ships nor beg them to notice its glow. It simply stands, radiant, unwavering, and ships cannot ignore the light that guides them safely to shore. Such is the woman in self-love, radiant, unyielding, magnetic. Visualize yourself as that lighthouse. Imagine men passing, and notice how you do not move, you do not plead. They turn toward you instinctively, because radiance never chases, it compels. When you crown yourself, you summon those who are not blind to sovereignty. This is where attraction transcends games and strategies. It is not manipulation, not performance, but inevitability. The woman who has claimed herself becomes unignorable, and the man meant to walk beside her cannot and will not look away. Quick recap of the truth. The mirror of unworthiness. Love rooted in hunger turns into desperation. Unhealed wounds disguise neglect as passion. Chasing crumbs only mirrors the shadow of not enough. Silent self-betrayal. Every unsaid no becomes a knife turned inward. Loneliness is never healed by a cage of half-love. The soul withers where authenticity is silenced. The projection trap. The man worshipped was a mirage of her own soul. She mistook fragments of self for promises from another. Illusion collapses when she awakens to her own reflection. The throne of boundaries. Without boundaries, love turns to sacrifice. Respect cannot bloom in soil watered by fear. A queen is recognized only when she guards her gates. Scarcity's illusion. Love withers when chased as if scarce. Clinging exposes fear, while abundance breathes allure. A radiant woman is already chosen before love arrives. Magnetic withdrawal. Absence speaks the language presence never could. Dignified retreat ignites value where begging failed. The one who refuses erasure becomes unforgettable. The inner beloved. No man can grant wholeness never found within. Union blooms when feminine and masculine unite inside. Self-marriage births sovereignty beyond desire. The irresistible signal. True self-love cannot be counterfeited or ignored. Her frequency becomes gravitational, inevitable, divine. The right man arrives not because she asked, but because she is. And now the circle closes. The truths are not instructions, they are thresholds. Every wound revealed was not condemnation, it was initiation. You were never meant to beg, to chase, to fracture yourself in the hope of being seen. You were meant to descend into the underworld of your own shadow and return crowned, carrying both your darkness and your light as one. Understand this. When you no longer hide from the terrifying silence within, men too can no longer look away from you. For self-possession is erotic. Boundaries are sacred. Solitude is no longer emptiness, but throne. A woman who is complete within herself does not enter a love story as a supplicant. She enters as a temple. Carl Jung once wrote, "The privilege of a lifetime is to become who you truly are." This is your initiation, not into running, not into waiting, not into chasing the men who reflect your absence, but into embodying the inexhaustible force within. Your silence is not weakness. Your solitude is not lack. Both are sacred wombs where sovereignty is reborn. If these words have moved through you, then let this be your ritual. Subscribe to Jung Mind, not to follow another voice, but to continue your inner descent, into shadow, into power, into the place where no man's gaze defines you. So the question lingers in your soul, echoing beyond this moment. What part of you is still performing just to be loved?